All right, today we're going to have a lot of fun talking about the AI girlfriends that are ruining an entire generation of men. That does sound a bit ominous. I'm sure that's the only challenge with men these days. But is AI really a significant factor here? So I think our big question is like, is it morally wrong? Is it bad for society, for men or women, to have relationships with an artificial intelligence that, let's be honest, is pretty good at mimicking a human in response and in discussions, and let's say as well, it's got some benefits, right? Like it's not going to yell at you. It's not going to get mad when you leave the toilet seat up. Like
There's a lot of bennies.
Unless you program
Um,
it to yell at you and you're into that.
that's true. There's guys that will want that.
really,
Yes.
I'm not sure I've ever
Definitely.
met one of those guys.
Brian, what's the case here that this article's making for why an entire generation of men has been ruined?
Well, so the idea is essentially that little toilet seat example is it. So the idea is that if I don't have somebody pushing back to, I mean, force me to be a man, right? To like actually do something productive, useful, consider myself, in a different light, to become morally, ethically, whatever better. Nobody called me on my crap, so to speak. Not that any of us have ever been in a relationship where our wives would have had to do that, because we were already excellent men. Then you end up with a bunch of, well, what would be the right word? Men without a spine, men without
Yeah.
growth. Um, I see. It's actually a very interesting thing because you could argue that, well, maybe the AI, as Greg was saying, could be trained to push back, but do it in such a growth mindset and loving and compassionate and understanding and patient way that it could enhance your ability to grow and improve and get better. You could even give it some level of understanding of moral and spiritual values, right? So you could program it to follow whatever values and say, hey, when it catches me doing something that's not in line with these ethics, with these values, with this faith tradition, call me on it, help me understand how to do that better.
Is this
But it's going to do
better
it
or
in a way with infinite patience.
is this better or worse than some some young guy following an influencer who tells him how to live his life and tries to teach him things through his courses that he charges people? Like, is this better or worse or just the same?
So you're talking about like the pickup artist type course thing, like that sort of
No, I'm talking
concept?
about like I think a lot of people get, maybe they're missing something in their upbringing that they just didn't quite get. That helps give them that backbone or helps them speak to people in social situations or teaches them the benefit of stoicism or not in certain situations. And I feel like a YouTube has filled that gap for a lot of people. So is this not just the next logical step?
Oh, that's interesting. So that's kind of like the Jordan Peterson effect, that he's really popular with young single men, I think in particular, looking
Hmm.
for some direction, some guidance, advice, all those types of things. I don't know if he has courses or not, but just, sort of the YouTube thing. Um, yeah, I think this probably is a similar situation where people can go and, I mean, using AI for advice to me seems like a really good thing. The question I think on the table is, at which point does it cross the line? Like here, they're talking a lot about like literally building, uh, like choosing the physical attributes, right? Like what they look like, what skin color, how tall, all the other physical attributes and hair and face and whatever else. And like, here's your ideal perfect supermodel person. And then you have a relationship with this thing. So tells your problems and your struggles and work's tough. And man, my mom's on my case and whatever else. And it's super empathetic and super patient. And at some point, you're like, yeah, well, I would like to be in a real relationship with like a physical woman. And it's interesting. They don't seem to have all these attributes that I programmed into this AI girlfriend. So now it's like, oh, wow, okay. Things changed here. And then sometimes she's, not as patient. There's mood swings. She has a tough day. Well, now I got to deal with her tough day. Now I got to deal with the challenge that she has in life versus if I'm dealing with an AI, it's all one way, right? Like I'm the one that has all the issues. I'm the one that has all the struggles. Help me address them. You don't learn to then help somebody else get through their own stuff. Um, yeah, I mean that would be, I think, where you're ruining men because then what empathy do you develop if you don't have to have it? So I think it's a bit different than the course thing, Rob, because to my theory on the course thing, and without knowing specifically what you're talking about, like an example course, the theory would be you take it to then improve your physical and real human relationships, right? So the course is not a substitute for them. It is a guide to help you understand, hey, when this situation happens, you're pissed and feel like walking out of work, you're upset at your boss, you're upset at your girlfriend, you're upset at whoever else. Like, this is the proper way to address that. And it can be simple things like you just said, Rob, maybe you weren't taught that. You know, I had one of my kids get mad at me the other day and stomp up the stairs and just say whatever and not want to have a conversation with me. Well, um, maybe I'm just a horrible father for asking my kids to do things they don't want to do. But, that's an opportunity to say, once they calm down, hey, is this how we solve problems? By stomping away and saying whatever? Like, or is there a better way? What does that look like? What's the real way to address it? It's okay to be mad. It's okay to say I need a break. It's okay to say, I'm not ready to talk about this. But if you just stomp off and say whatever, no problems in your life will ever get solved with anyone else.
Right.
There has to be a point where you have to come back. Well, that's what parents are supposed to do.
I think you kind of drew the line on the division between is it helping you get better in the real world or is it replacing things in the real world? So, there are already VR things that can help you go talk to girls, that can help you in job interviews, that can help you, whatever. And that I don't see as a problem because it's helping you become better in real world situation, real life things. It's not replacing things. It obviously could be replacing some teaching, some training, some stuff. But in reality, that's helping you to progress as a human, to be more human in essence. Where if you have a thing that's replacing human things like a relationship and that kind of stuff, then that I think is actually taken away from us as humans, our what it means to be human. And that I think is where the big issue starts because most people nowadays want pleasure over pain, whatever that means. It could be physical, it could be mental, it could be, just agreeing with me, it could be comforting me all the time. And that's not what actually helps people grow. And that's what gets us into our own heads, our own mindset that, like, oh, I deserve all this. This is mine. This is how it should be. And then once you go out into the real world, you realize, like, no, that's not it at all. So I think that is where the struggle is because most people will want that perfect girlfriend or that perfect happiness or that pleasure without the pain. But in reality, you need that side of it to grow, to develop. So I can see these AI bots being good for humans, but also bad for humans based off of how you use it. Basically, like anything, like the internet, you can use it for amazing, great learning, connecting with people, or you can use it for things that's just basically going to bring humanity down. So that's kind of my take. It's kind of that line: is it helping you as a human in the real world, or is it taking you out of the world?
Well, I think this, I don't know if you're gonna see this, but like essentially the argument here is we have a population collapse coming, right? So you need so many people working to pay for Social Security for people that are not working. And since the birth rate has dropped dramatically, you just need more people having babies to then support the people that are in retirement and have Social Security and so on. So that's not really the argument we're making today, to be clear. So that is a very social and a very economic argument. We're trying to focus, I think, more on the moral, ethical side of it, because that is like, yeah, okay, get it. You need more babies to pay more taxes. Is that the peak of humanity to have more babies to pay more taxes? Is that really the best argument we have? If it is, man, that's pretty sad. Uh, the thing here that is pointing out, I think, is the difference between men and women. 60% of young men are single compared to only 30% of women. It leads me to believe to wonder, like, the men that aren't single, how many girlfriends do they have? The math
That's
isn't
one of
adding
the
up
maths
here,
as well.
guys. Some of these women aren't aware of the nature
Uh,
of their relationship, are they? Anyway, moving beyond that point. Um,
great stat.
so Greg, the question would be, if I have a relationship that I'm happy with, and you can argue, well, it's not really possible to be happy with an AI, but let's just say I'm happy with it, and I'm single, and I don't want any kids. What's the problem?
Oh, I can tell you that right there. It ends with you. You've ended every future possible. There is no other future after the end of your life. When your life ends, it's over. You've left no legacy. There is
Well,
no
that's not
little.
true.
There is. That is true. You
A lot of
have
people, I can be effective in business. I can write books that affect the next generation. I can still
no,
participate in my church. I mean,
no,
there's so many
Brian,
things. I can be an
no.
engineer and develop systems that future generations use to implement
Sure,
into buildings and
sure.
cars. And
But those
there's a
things
hundred
don't
things.
change. Those things don't have the ability to make decisions of their own. They're a dead path.
Right, but by that theory,
Yeah,
anybody that doesn't have children leaves nothing behind.
it's true. It's a sad, scary reality, but that's true. If you don't have children, then at the end of your life, your line is done. There is no future for your line. You don't create anything new. Entropy just huddles all around you right then at that point. It's a dead end. Does that make
So
sense?
you don't seem to be one that's a fan of legacy in the sense of I had big
Well,
accomplishments that the future generations are
anything
going to
that you
talk about.
accomplish that's not genetic is going to be a dead end for you. That's just a fact.
Right, but
It's
that's not
not an
necessarily the
opinion.
case for humanity. Humanity can benefit greatly from the actions of an
Only
individual.
in one direction. Only in one direction. You only create one potential future from that, Brian. When you have a child, you create something that has choice. And when you create something that has choice, you create many futures. You create many potentials. But when you've only got yourself, these people who have an AI girlfriend or whatever, I'm glad they're happy. That's terrific, but there's no future. That nothing they do, even if they cured cancer and put man on Mars, there is only one path forward from their life at that point.
All
There's
right, so
only
Chuck, I got to ask you. Um, the Bible says better that you're single, but if you can't control your passion, then be married.
okay. So there's a lot
But
of things. What's the
but it
context?
but it points out directly that the better option so that you can dedicate your life fully to God is to be single, assuming you're going to dedicate it to God. So you're disagreeing with that. You're saying, no,
Well,
that's not a
possibly. Well, bring me the context of the Bible. There's a lot of things said in the Bible, but is that the word of God? Is that the word of a rabbi in the Bible? Is that the word of
that was
Christ? Is that
I have to
who
look up.
said
I think it's
that?
in Corinthians, so it'd be Paul saying that.
Okay. Well, Paul said a lot of things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's exactly God's word. It's just what Paul said. I'm sure God agrees to some level, but God, I don't believe was. I don't think Paul was chosen as a speaker for God, despite the whole church thing. I mean, just saying,
I think that's
just because
kind of what
it's in the
Christians
Bible and
believe
because
that he
somebody in the
was
Bible
actually, Chuck.
just because something's in the Bible and somebody said it doesn't mean it's the word of God. There were many horrible things said in the Bible by many bad people. The king of Baal is in the Bible, but that doesn't mean that everything the king of Baal said or did is something that God supports or
So how do you know what God
okay.
supports?
Well, you have to ask him yourself. And you have to think, is the future better with me not having children, or is the future better with me having children? Is me having an AI girlfriend really going to help the future? Is that a selfish choice? Am I thinking about me and only
Well,
me?
that's an
Not have
interesting
any
question. If Pol
viewpoint
Pot's
outside
parents
of
didn't
that?
have kids, would the future have been better? If Mao's parents didn't have kids, would the future have been better?
There would have been many futures. There's
That's a whole different level.
potentials.
All right, so we got your opinion on the child versus no child thing. Let's back to the relationship. So, other than the lack of children, I go ahead, Rob, if you had something to tie in there before we move on.
No, let's move on.
All right. Uh, so let's just say you disagree with Chuck on that. and that you think, you know what, I don't need kids. I'm not going to have kids anyway. Whether it's AI or no AI, I'm not having
It's your
kids.
choice. I'm just
That's
saying it's a
just
dead
the
end.
thing. I'm choosing not to. So
Facts.
if that's the case, and I'm committed to not having children, is there any other reason that having a relationship with an AI would be detrimental to me?
I mean, at that point, you pretty much close yourself down. What do you think, Rob?
I think it's a brilliant opinion because every opinion I think here is valid. I'm just curious because if I'm one of those 60% of men who's single and I'm a part of the percentage who realistically, in the animal kingdom might not have a chance of finding a mate, that's going to lead to some sort of depression. And if I'm also part of that 1 in 5 that doesn't have a close friend, and I spend a lot of my time at home, isolated, maybe gaming or something at night, so I don't really get out much, and I find happiness in something like this, and then that radiates out from me into the world in whatever way that manifests, whether that's through the conversations that I have online or when I go to the store and I meet people and I'm a bit happier than I was if I didn't have this AI girlfriend, despite the fact I'm not leaving, a physical legacy, like a genetic DNA legacy. Is that such a bad thing for the world?
I jump in there. You made a few assumptions,
Yeah.
which
What?
is which is if you don't have a girlfriend, you're lonely. If you don't have a
No,
girlfriend,
no,
you're being
I was
depressed.
quoting the
If
article, just the
Right, right.
article.
He was going from what it said.
well, then the article's making some assumptions that you
He
can't
did.
be happy without a girlfriend. You can't be happy if you're alone. You can't be happy if without, you know, connections to people. But there are ways to be happy, and actually, if you look in the best ways to be happy, it does include people, but you can be happy with a limited number of people. You can be
Uh,
happy with other relationships. And so I think that might be the first thing is we as humans don't know what actually happiness looks like and what makes humans truly happy. We know what kind of makes us happy. That's why we fill it with candy, food, movies, you name it, video games, because it brings us a little bit of joy. Is that truly what human happiness is? And I think that is the point here where it's like, oh, we're trying to fit in this little bit of happiness in to make us happy. But that's not really what human happiness is. And that's where I think the big problem with this is that sure, it'll make you happy, a little more joyful. It'll help you get through your day. But is that really what human happiness is? And that's where I think the big question is, are these leading to actual human happiness, human flourishing, human growth? And so, sure, yeah, it can bring you a little happiness. It can prevent you from being depressed. It can prevent you from, doing crazy things. But is that really what happiness is? Or is that just kind of like a placeholder? Is that just kind of like, it's good enough?
It's a hedonistic attitude. It's all about me, 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 me. So I don't know.
I
but
have a
that is very human.
Is it?
Well, the ego
Uh,
part is possibly. I have a This is a slight change, but I actually think it goes into that, Greg, a bit. So if you want to torture someone, what is the worst torture that you can give them?
Everything they could possibly want.
Give them everything now. Well, it's
Yeah, that's hell. Having your
I don't
every
know how you could
desire.
do that, first of all. Like I don't know how you could absolutely do that, but the generally speaking, when you read about like internment camps and things like that, or even prison systems, the worst punishment they can give people is solitary confinement.
Isolation.
So now I'm wondering, like, I hope nobody actually does this experiment because it could be horrific. But it's like if you took a bunch of people and put them in solitary confinement with an AI or without an AI, would
Oh,
they actually end up better? Like, would their, demeanor, like, how much pain would it be to have the AI? Now, this is not a perfect situation because then it's like, okay, we got solitary confinement with no interaction. You got solitary confinement with an AI interaction, then you have people actually interacting with a human. Maybe you have a roommate or something. I don't know. Um, maybe you have your spouse. And then see. Uh,
somebody's gonna want a conjugal with their Nintendo now. That's all I'm thinking. I'm just, yeah, they've got their AI relationship. They're in prison. They got to see their box, man. How's that work?
I, I'm just saying, like that would be an interesting social experiment that probably is unethical and should not be carried out. Um, but that could answer some of these questions about what is required or how much can you fake, right? Because essentially that's what you're doing. You're faking intimacy. You're faking, that
Uh-huh.
appreciation in that relationship. But we see that in many ways. Like if we take a step back from the romantic side of it for a second, and we said, okay, I go to my doctor, and my doctor cares about me. My doctor wants the best for me. The doctor wants me to be healthy, and so on. These things are assumed, Hippocratic oath, and so on. But I can switch doctors, and the next doctor theoretically has the same intentions and so on. And if I don't pay my bill, the doctor's not going to continue to work with me. Um, so that's a very different relationship, sort of. Why do I say sort of?
Yeah.
Well, every relationship does involve some level of sacrifice for both participants. If it's a healthy relationship, if one person is doing all of the sacrificing in a marriage, and so we can talk about the relationship with a doctor and a therapist, there's a financial sacrifice that's being made in one direction, but there's a time sacrifice, there's a mental sacrifice, committing their thoughts and ideas to the patient as well. So that maybe isn't as clear with the monetary aspect in a romantic relationship. Maybe it is, but there's still things that are required that both parties are giving and giving up. Otherwise, you have a very unhealthy relationship. One other point, I'll go back to the loneliness thing before I forget about it, because I do think this is relevant. I think for guys, if you start looking through some of this research, and there's entire books written about, um, men being more single and the depression increases and so on, it's kind of scary. I think for a lot of guys to get into relationships because they see the high divorce rates. They see that something like 80% of divorces are initiated by women. They see, I mean, ask any guy, they know multiple friends that have had their businesses taken through a divorce. They've had been crushed financially. They've had their kids taken. Like, there's a lot of scary things out there in a relationship. And I think um, to some, to maybe a lot, it's better to avoid it than to take the risk. And I'm not saying that's the right solution. I don't think it is. There's probably other ways there. Obviously, I think there's other ways to mitigate that risk. Um, but I kind of get it from that perspective when you look into some of the research and stuff, which I don't really have in front of me now, but uh, of why guys are probably more likely to go down that route, having that AI relationship and also the loneliness and so on. I don't know if that helps the conversation. It's just the reality of, I think why you're seeing this. I think Japan in
I think
particular
it's a good
has a
theory,
very
but
high rate of AI relationships with men.
I don't know if it stacks up though. I feel like potentially it's a case against marriage. Like, okay, I get that, but a case
Sure.
against relationships, I don't know. I feel like that'd be a nice crutch for guys to fall on. But I think, you know, like as Greg mentioned, I think being in a relationship does not equal happiness. In fact, in a lot of cases, it equals the opposite. But I don't think any of the things you've mentioned there are necessarily what this article's touching on. I don't think that those 60% of guys, most of them probably wouldn't be a conscious choice. Also, that is quite a young age group as well. Like most people are single at that age. I was. So I feel like it's quite selective in the statistics it's pulling.
That might be true. And I've seen other numbers that differ from this. 1 in 5 men report not having a single close friend. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's
Um,
just that's just sad. Like that I think is something that everybody should have. But a relationship, a romantic relationship, not necessarily.
yeah. And I actually wonder if that is also a somewhat of a result of, this is total speculation, of having smaller families, right? When I look at my generation and older, my parents' generation, a lot of times their best friends are their brothers, their sisters, at least close friends and so on. Certainly isn't always the case, but it seems to be pretty common. Anyway, that would be tied into this. It still is weird that double the men are single to women. That's an issue. I think Greg, you did clarify that can you be happy without any human relationships? I don't think that's the case, but they don't necessarily have to be romantic. And that's, the other point they're making here with saying that 1 in 5 men doesn't have a single close friend. And I can definitely see how if you don't have a close friend, if you don't have somebody going to an AI, mean, have any conversation you want about challenges. It's super empathetic, or you can tell it not to be. You can tell it to be, judgmental. You can tell it to be whatever you want. And it's gonna present that back to you in a way that's easy to digest, or at least in a way that you want it.
Mm.
That made me think of something. This assumes people know what makes them happy.
Yeah. This is a
But
sign of mental illness, is what this is.
there's been studies that say if people shoot for happiness, they're unhappy because they don't know what actually makes them happy. And so the reality is, it's the things that they don't know that actually makes them happy. And so the reality is, if you're building your own AI friend, companion, whatever, you're building in what you think will make you happy. And reality is, we're terrible at judging that. We're terrible at knowing that. And so that'll actually probably backfire. It might help you take little steps to feeling happy, but it might actually be decreasing your overall mental health or your overall happiness or your state in 10 years.
There's kind of a counter to that as well, Greg. Like if you're unhappy, you don't try and be happy. Like one of the quickest ways or one of the more effective non-medical, like non-drug ways to improve depression is to go volunteer. In other words, to help other people. So you're not feeling happy, but if you want to become happy, you actually just go
Oh,
help other human beings.
all right. There's an Amish wedding in town today. I told Greg about this yesterday. They started showing up yesterday. There's actually a big thing on Kansas City News telling people watch out for traffic and stuff. Hundreds of buggies and stuff going around town. They're coming up. Yesterday, these folks, they're building something out there for this wedding and whatnot. They're all working hard. They're working hard, man. But you know what? They're all smiling. They're all happy as could be. They're all just having the best time possible. Just think about that for a minute. I bet not one of those people there has ever even considered something like this. And I'll bet you haven't ever seen a group of people as happy as those people up there today. You know, it's storming and raining today. They're still up there having the time of their life all day, all for a wedding because of community, because they all came together as a group to do something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
It makes you,
longevity studies have shown that as well, Chuck, that when they looked at that was the coal town in Pennsylvania, that the entire community from Italy moved to Pennsylvania and created their own community
yeah, I've seen
in
that.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
And they all spoke Italian. They all like had the same connections, and they still ate their Italian food and all these things. Um, but they looked at diet, they looked at workout, they look at all these different things, and the only thing they could figure out that actually made these people live longer, have less heart disease, have less cancer, was that they had an amazing support system. That if somebody lost their job and needed help, the entire community was there to help them. And I think in ways that are less invasive than, hey, let me show up with $100 bill. Like, hey, I brought a meal over for you. Hey, I got breakfast. Let me take the kids who can go on, apply for jobs or whatever. Like, I think it was really community driven, not just here's money, right? Because that feels a lot different to people, right? That feels like I, I'm taking something different than, oh, a friend's just bringing a meal for me. And so that shows longevity. I mean, there's a lot of reduced illnesses and so on because of community. It seems likely, and we don't have this data yet, and hopefully we'll never have this data, that if you had your whole community was a bunch of AIs, right? You had the sweet girlfriend and you had the jerk friend and you had whatever, you build your whole AI friend group, um, that your sense of belonging is not going to be quite as
strong.
deep. Honestly, though, I can see where it would feel good, particularly in the echo chamber, right? That's what Sam Altman talks about. Everyone's gonna have their own AI that just reflects back to them their own views.
Yeah.
Except for he being God himself defined which views would not be acceptable.
Right.
Lord Altman. Um,
so
Robert Altman.
so even with that example where you have your own digital AI community, there's still a physical component to humans that we need. Um, if you then say, cool, we're gonna have robots with human-like flesh that interact with us, then it's like, okay, getting a little closer to that human interaction and
That's an
physical
excellent point,
touch.
Greg. There's research on that that shows that if you take a little baby and for the first 6 weeks of their life don't hold them enough, um, you hold them as much as you want the rest of their life, their brain has changed already in that time frame, and that their ability to interact socially has been hampered. Our aunt actually volunteers to go down and hold babies that are in situations where the family's not there or whatever, just for this purpose. So yeah, I mean, there's absolutely a physical interaction. I've seen it with my own kids. You know, the love languages. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the 5 different love languages. At least for our 4 children, at a young age, I believe all of their primary love language is touch. I mean, my little 14-month-old, he's starting to run, but anytime he runs towards you, he has to hold on. He has to grab you. He has to hug you. Like he wants to cuddle with you at night. Like touch is the thing. Acts of service and words of affirmation and those types of things aren't even relevant to a child. And so as you get older, maybe these other love languages become more prominent. But I would totally agree that the research that I've seen suggests the importance of healthy touch. But what if the AI replaces that? That maybe is a discussion for next time because that could get
That's where it gets further, but I still think there's other levels to that. And um, mainly, we're trying to use tech to solve a human problem.
Hmm.
You
well, we
use
always
tech to
do to
solve,
some degree. Let's be honest.
right?
That's what tech
And
does.
But it's
not
emotional at
really.
this point. This is a
You
yeah.
you use tech to solve tech problems. If you try to use tech to solve human problems, you cause more problems. Then you try to get new tech to solve those previously developed problems that you didn't have before.
Well, you might need to clarify what you mean by a human problem.
Okay.
Like it's a human problem if I have to crawl into a coal mine shaft that may collapse on me and, die.
That
Coal
I don't
miners'
see as a
jobs are
human
very
problem.
unsafe.
That's not a human problem. That's a human activity, but not a problem, right? There's nothing wrong with that human who's doing that, right? They're not having any kind of illness. They're not having any kind of depression. They're not having any kind of like. It's not because they are that way they're doing that, right? They're doing that for a better purpose, for a bigger purpose. So I wouldn't consider that a human problem. That's just a human activity that you can replace with technology. Rob has a hand up.
Yeah. Is it a human problem or is it a political one? Because this is not in the article, but I would posit that probably most of the people that are going to be affected by this are probably people that aren't educated, as well as another the people that aren't having so much of an issue with this. Maybe this will become sort of endemic problem for all of humanity in the future. But I would have thought right now it would start with people that are more vulnerable to that kind of um,
The human
solution, if
problem.
you want to call it that.
That's the human problem is we're more susceptible to this because we don't actually know it is good for humans, right? So we're trying to put tech to solve a human problem, not humans to solve human problems, right? Our own whatever makes humanity better as humans. We're actually trying to say, hey, tech can do this because we're depressed. It's going to make us happy. It's like, no, there are human things that humans been doing. Like Chuck said, the Amish have not seen any of this tech. They're not related to this tech. I bet you their communities, their stuff actually prevents a lot of this depression, loneliness stuff
Mm.
just because they have human solutions for a human problem, not trying to use tech to solve human problems.
Yeah, Rob, earlier you were talking about the guy sitting at home playing his video games. He doesn't have any friends. That's because he put himself in that situation. I mean, if that's your life, if you're coming home from work every day and you're sitting in front of the TV, you're watching TV, you're playing video games, you're dead inside, man. You're not doing anything but wasting your time away. You're just
Mhm.
whiling
That's
it
the thing.
away. So it's to me that seems like a sign of mental illness in our society. That young man who's sitting at home every single night doing it, that's fun to do on a Saturday night, man, or maybe an early morning or something like that. But you can't do that every day. You have to get out there and do things with your life. And you have to do things you don't like, because when you start doing things you don't like, before you know it, you'll find out you really enjoy what happened because of it. Okay?
That's a great example of tech solving a human problem, which is, oh, I'm lonely. I want to have fun. I don't know how to deal with people. Let's just let's just game.
Let's just game. I don't know,
Well,
man. When I was growing up, malls were the thing. People were everywhere. Everybody wanted to run around the malls and see one another. And it's like we finally got sick of each other and we just want to hide away. I don't understand it because this little town I live in, man, people walk the sidewalks every day. I see social people all over the place, but it doesn't seem like that's happened in the cities. It seems like the
well,
bigger
you're only
cities.
going to see social people, Chuck. The asocial people you're not going to see.
Yeah, but there's a ton of them out there. Is what I'm saying. I mean, there's literal people walking on the sidewalks every day in a small town. But you go to Lee Summit or one of the close suburbs or something, you don't really see people out. I mean, you see people driving from their car from store to store, going in, doing their business, coming out, going. They're not really living their life there. They're not experiencing it. They're not experiencing the shops, the
Uh,
people in the shops. They don't get to know people. I mean, do you know the cashier that works at your grocery store?
I'm not allowed to grocery shop.
Me either.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of disappointing, isn't it? I used to grocery shop. We actually found out that every time I went into the store with my wife, we spent 15% more than when I stayed in the car. So I have to stay in the car. I'm not allowed to go in the grocery store.
So to summarize this, what I'm actually hearing here is the the negative results of having an artificial relationship are true regardless of if you have a theistic belief. So let's assume you don't believe in God, you don't believe in a soul, because that's a whole different argument that, we're made for relationships, we're made in the image and likeness of God, we're made to serve each other and so on. But even if we look at the social evidence and assume you don't believe any of that stuff, there's still serious detrimental aspects to removing the social nature of humans and trying to replace it with an artificial being, even if the being is intelligent, empathetic, possibly even personified physically, right? In a physical device. Rob, one of the points that I just saw here is you said it sounds like the men probably are looking for relationships, but that's actually not the case. They've just given up at least half of those
Give
60%. They don't even want a relationship. And so that's that's pretty terrifying. But the other side of it is they can get the, let's say, instant gratification and pleasure center benefits of a relationship without having one and without any of the negatives. Like, so from them, I don't have somebody taking my kids. I don't, you have to go through a divorce, which you want to look at the connection between heart attacks and cardiac arrest, these types of things. One of the biggest triggers for that is divorce. It's extremely stressful. Most people rate that, if they've gone through it, as the most stressful thing in their lives. I think the only thing that comes up worse in surveys is losing a child, like having one of your children pass away. So I get it, from that perspective, but replacing those things, if you only did the things in life that were easy, you're guaranteed to not have a very rewarding and satisfying life. Anything else to add?